dedication, common sense, and steady hand we need to help steer OEJ in the days ahead. Finally, today the Justice Department is also issuing an interim final rule that will restore our ability to use supplemental environmental projects to compensate victims and remedy violations of federal environmental laws. Their use will be subject to new guidelines and limitations set forth in a separate memorandum that I'm also issuing today. These are environmentally beneficial projects that a defendant has proposed and agreed to implement as part of a settlement of an enforcement action. For decades before 2017, both the Justice Department and the EPA relied upon them to compensate victims, remedy harm, punish and deter violations of the environmental laws. Because these projects bring environmental and public health benefits to the communities most directly affected by the underlying violations, they are particularly powerful tools for advancing environmental justice. In closing, let me say, as I've said many times before, that the Justice Department has three essential responsibilities: upholding the rule of law, keeping our country safe, and protecting civil rights. Seeking and securing justice for communities that are disproportionately burdened by environmental harms is a task demanded by all three of those responsibilities. It is a task that we gladly undertake. I am now pleased to turn the program over to Administrator Regan. Whoops. Sorry. And by the way, this is Cynthia.
Thank you, Attorney General, for hosting us here at the Department of Justice and for your exemplary leadership. I'm so grateful to have your partnership in this most important mission. Since stepping into my role as EPA Administrator, I've had the privilege to visit communities all across our nation, communities of color and low-income communities especially that have been hurting for a long time. In November, I traveled through Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas as part of our Journey to Justice tour, so that I could see up close the injustices folks have been living with for decades. The conditions I saw were deeply troubling. I'm talking about children going to school right next door to chemical plants, generations of family members diagnosed with cancer, likely connected to the pollution in the air they breathe or the water they drink. I've met with too many parents whose children have been poisoned by lead and whose lives have been turned upside down. Some of those conditions I've seen have been so shocking, I've had to remind myself that I was still standing in the United States of America. These systemic challenges have harmed vulnerable communities for decades, robbing them of the opportunity to lead healthy, fulfilling lives. No child, no person in this country should have to endure such egregious circumstances. That's why during his first week on the job, President Biden issued an executive order charging his cabinet to take a whole-of-government approach to advancing environmental justice so that all of us, from the DOJ to the EPA, work hand in hand to uplift overburdened communities. And that's why this new enforcement strategy is so significant. Communities, particularly those with environmental justice concerns, deserve the assurance that their government will take vigorous enforcement action when polluters flout the law and jeopardize their well-being. The Justice Department is one of EPA's most critical partners in this mission, and I'm thrilled to see the DOJ formally restore supplemental environmental projects. These projects have been an important part of the EPA's enforcement program for more than 30 years, but they were inexplicably revoked during the previous administration. Restoring the use of this powerful tool will advance the enforcement work EPA has been working hard to strengthen since President Biden took office. As part of settlement negotiations, defendants can once again agree to undertake supplemental environmental projects that provide important health benefits for those affected by illegal activities. These projects can range from installing air filtration systems at schools in heavily industrialized areas to abating lead paint hazards in housing. They can help deliver the kinds of health protections that marginalized communities like those I met with on the Journey to Justice tour have been demanding for years. This is such a significant resource that has the potential to change people's lives, especially those who've historically suffered from exposure to multiple sources of pollution. At the end of the day, Our responsibility is to make people's lives better, to ensure that all people, regardless of race, zip code, or the money they have in their pockets, are treated with fairness and dignity and respect. This action is also an important part of delivering on that responsibility. So I look forward to working closely with the Attorney General and his team to protect vulnerable communities all across this country and deliver long overdue justice. I'll now turn it over to Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta. Thank you.
Thank you, Administrator Regan. We are grateful that you are able to be here today. The burdens of environmental pollution have long been borne disproportionately by members of minority, tribal, and low-income communities. No American should have to live, work, or send their kids to school in a neighborhood that carries a disproportionate share of environmental hazards. The Justice Department is committed to doing everything we can to address these disparities. That is why, as the Attorney General mentioned, we are issuing a comprehensive strategy on environmental justice to guide the work of all department components. This new strategy will ensure that the department is using every available tool to secure environmental justice for everyone. This means prioritizing enforcement of environmental laws as well as civil rights statutes such as Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits recipients of federal funding from discriminating on the basis of race, color, or national origin. The strategy directs department components to prioritize cases that reduce environmental harm on overburdened and underserved communities, including communities of color, tribal populations, and low-income rural and urban communities. To that end, department components, with the support from the new Office of Environmental Justice, will be tasked with developing protocols to assess the environmental justice impact of their investigations. We also know that securing environmental justice demands the meaningful involvement of affected communities in the decisions that impact them. So the strategy directs the new Office of Environmental Justice to work to build deeper connections with communities that are affected by violations of environmental laws. It also requires all 93 U.S. attorneys across the country to designate an environmental justice coordinator to help identify areas of concern in their communities and to establish procedures for members of the public to report those concerns. To sustain our commitment to environmental justice, the department needs a workforce that is informed about environmental justice issues and concerns. The strategy thus requires the development of environmental justice education programs and training opportunities for department personnel. This comprehensive strategy underscores the department's commitment to ensuring that all Americans have access to clean water to drink, clean air to breathe, and healthy, thriving communities where they can live, work, and raise their families. That is the heart of environmental justice. Thank you.
Let's start with Pam King from the University.
Hi, could you speak to plans to staff the new Office of Environmental Justice, in addition to Cynthia Ferguson, of course?
Yeah, so Cynthia's going to be the head of the office. There will be a detailee from the Civil Rights Division so that we have both parts of the two principal parts of the department, but in fact this is going to be an all-of-government effort. We have in the recent appropriations subcommittee asked for additional money, and there will be obviously additional lawyers from the Environment and Natural Resources Division in the office.
All right, with that, we'll go to Yamiche.
Thanks for taking my question. Two questions. The first one is, can you talk a little bit about how quickly you anticipate investigations like the one in Lowndes County, Alabama being launched, and how will you prioritize which communities you target?
I'm sorry, this sounds like a question for the EPA.
Well, the Department of Justice has launched an investigation.
You're talking about the fugitive investigation?
No, in Alabama. So the Department of Justice launched its first and only environmental justice investigation in Lowndes County, Alabama, looking at the waste there. And I'm just wondering if you're going to have other investigations like the one in Lowndes County, Alabama, and how you'll figure out how to prioritize communities to look into them, since it's obviously a big task.
Sorry, there's another thing going on in Alabama right now. also in a county that begins with an L, so I'm sorry about that. But yes, so, a principal part of the comprehensive strategy notes that we will prioritize based on communities that are most disproportionately affected by environmental violations and environmental crimes. So that's the governing principle for how we're going to prioritize these.
I could also ask you that there's this leaked opinion or leaked draft opinion by the Supreme Court that seems like justices are going to be poised to overturn Roe v. Wade. What do you make of that leaked decision, and also what avenue, if any, might the Department of Justice be looking into to impact women's access to abortion?
Okay, so that's a two-part question. On the first part, the Chief Justice has announced that he's asked the Marshal of the Court to investigate the leak, so I'm not going to have any more comment about that. On the second question, the document is not a final decision of the court, and I don't want to talk about the deliberative processes of the court, but what I will say is that the Justice Department has steadfastly been committed to defending the right to abortion. We are amicus in the Dobbs case. The Solicitor General herself argued on behalf of the United States in the Dobbs case. If the law changes, we will address appropriate next steps at that time. But what will not change is our commitment to defending the rights of women and all Americans.
Thanks. Just quickly on the investigation, has the department been consulted at all or playing any role in the investigation into the leak of that draft document? And then secondarily, can you just speak to what the department is doing to attempt to locate the fugitive suspect in Alabama, obviously a murder suspect and a correctional official?
Now I've got all the questions mixed together. Excellent. Yeah. So again, on the first question, I really can't say anything other than the fact that the Chief Justice has announced that the Marshal of the Court will be doing the investigation. With respect to the fugitive investigation, the United States Marshals are now the lead agency seeking to capture both fugitives. They are armed and regarded as extremely dangerous. We need help from the community. So if anybody sees them, they should not approach them, but they should report to the police immediately. Thank you.
You know it's working.